Hello, 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 and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem, and I'm here with you today with a beautiful selection of beads from the Color Trends collection. Give it a shimmy, give it a shake. So this is Lili from Color Trends, featuring such a beautiful array of purples and pinks and some of the most gorgeous little clay beads I've ever seen in my life. The technique I want to share with you today is a drop pendant, absolutely achievable for people who are really quite new to wire working. If you've never picked up wire and pliers before, give it a go. There is no wrong way for this to turn out. It's an expression of the beautiful bead mix we're working with. I'm only going to be working with one wire gauge to keep it simple. 18 gauge round wire. Now I've worked for my demonstration pieces in a copper colour, but I've got some nice antique bronze because it will look really beautiful on the board. I want to pop you down to just have a quick look at this bead mix, so let's press some buttons. Here we go. So this is how your Color Trends bead mixes come out to you in these forever useful little boxes. These are absolutely magnificent for travelling with jewellery. They're very, very lightweight and just strong enough to keep everything protected. So don't put them out with the recycling. Reuse them if you can. I've been joined by the lovely Hazel and Cherie. How are you, darlings? I hope that you are very, very well. So the beads that we have in the bead mix known as Lili, let's just pop that one out of the way. We have got the most fabulous little floral doohickeys. Now these have got a really large drill aperture in the middle and lots of texture to them. We've got pinks, we've got pale pinks, we've got hot pinks, and we've got these absolutely gorgeous almost luminescent purple beads as well. They are fabulous. Just up my colour palette, this one. You've got these fantastic AB coated cushion faceted beads. These are really showy, especially on the wrist, really gorgeous. We've got faceted bicones in the fuchsiest fuchsia I've ever seen. It's a beautiful day in Oregon. It's actually been fair here in the middle of England in Oxfordshire. It hasn't rained today, so that's definitely a win as far as I'm concerned. I was considering dialing Noah last week, so we shall see. We've got rhinestone spacers. I absolutely adore these. It's like a hot take on maybe a titanium colourway. Let's just bring that back down into the focal zone slightly for you there. Faceted rondelles in that gorgeous coated colourway. I've got drops, really beautiful metallic fuchsias there. Sunny in California, my goodness, almost 29 degrees centigrade. That sounds amazing. I'm very jealous. Large rhinestone spacers. We've got some tassels as well. So I'm going to randomly select from these beads throughout today's tutorial because every single one of them teams with every other single one of them. Now, have you seen the style guides? I don't know if you have, but Lili has a beautiful style guide called Lili Pulitzer, and all it is it's a suggestion of some items that will team perfectly. So if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration and you're not quite sure what will go with Lili, take a look at the style guide and you'll be able to see some suggestions for chain, matching tensure beads, silks, things like that, just to give you a little bit of a push if you wanted to have a go with something. Now, one of my favourite beads from this mix is this absolutely fabulous floral, feels like a clay bead. Really, really gorgeous. Hello, Jem. It's rainy in Rhode Island today, waiting for those May flowers. Hope you're on the mend. I'm getting there, thank you, sweetheart. I've not got a lot of movement, but yes, all good, thank you, sweetheart. I hope that you are well despite the rain. And it's dull in Massachusetts, says Hazel. Well, it can only get better. Look at the flowers on this little baby. That's what I'm looking at and thinking, it's time we had some blooms. So talking of blooms, Color Trends is a fantastic range of beautifully curated bead boxes. Let me just show you that box again. Stephanie says, Jem, you're a trooper. I hope you're better soon, love. Thank you, darling. I'm on a waiting list to have a scan and we'll see what they say. Have I still got a shoulder? Yes. Does it do anything? Not a lot. So all of the Color Trends bead mixes are fabulous, but I particularly enjoy this one because it contains purple. And what's purple? Purple's the best colour ever. Well, it is for me anyway. Why don't we take a look at the samples I've made up? And I say samples plural because this technique can make a dozen different designs really easily. Let's just pop that back up into the top corner there. So I worked with those faceted rondelles and the beautiful floral inspired clay beads to make this drop pendant. And this is just one piece of 18 gauge round wire. And I'll show you as we work through a couple of different ways that you can change this up. Now, the most easy way to change it up, obviously, is to change the beads. This selection that you see here on my little heart dish is what's left over after I've made these 3 pendants. So you can see the value in a bead mix like this just going on and on and on and on and on. You've got lots of other bits and bobs to work with there. So in this piece I showed a technique where we skirt around the bead but we don't hug it like we do in this technique. So there are different ways that you can make the same pendant, same technique, but they do look different. So it's a bar drop. Let's see if I can get that to just sit up right. No, it's not going to. How rude. So this one is all of the pinks. All of the pinks. Now, I know some of you are absolutely pink people. And if you are a pink person, then this one is for you. And you can see we've got loads to choose from. We've got some purples. We could mix it up, put purples and pinks together. I'm definitely feeling using one of these to demonstrate with because they are such gorgeous little beads. So this one has got a very large coil. And behind it, we've surreptitiously attached this beautiful little floral tassel. These are so much fun. And the reason I've hidden it behind that spiral, or that coil if you prefer, is because I like to think it makes it look like the flower is just dangling from nowhere magically. So we've got lots of different design ideas, and again I would refer you to have a look at the style guide. There's one for this mix. It's called Lili Pulitzer. Check it out, should be available to you, and if it's not, I will ask one of the gorgeous people at JJB headquarters to drop you a link to that later. So that's all about Lili, which is the name of our bead mix today. Why don't we have a look at the kind of tools we're going to use? So as ever, I'm going to be using my bent chain nose pliers. Now I've had these for maybe 13 years, maybe 14 years. They're very elderly, but they still work for me. The reason I choose to use a bent chain nose plier is because I can hold it underneath the item I'm working on and you can see a little bit better what's going on. If you prefer, you could of course just use a very standard chain nose plier. What you're looking for when you're working with wire, especially on designs like this, is a nice tapered tip. So you could use your standard chain nose pliers or really any flat pliers with a relatively fine tip to them. You'll also be looking to use some round nose pliers, or you could grab yourself a set of memory wire finishing pliers like I have. The point that we're going to be using these for today is to make a bail at the top and to start spirals. So if you have your 6-step bail makers, they're absolutely perfect too. Now I will always be working with quality flush cutters. So these are absolutely magnificent and I wouldn't go anywhere without them. If I'm going to have time to make jewellery, those are definitely on my bucket list of tools to take with me. That's not the right description, is it? Anyway, let's talk about wire, shall we? So I'm going to be working with about 9 to 10 inches of 18 gauge round wire. Hi, says Joan. Hello to you. I hope that you are well, darling. So if you've never worked with wire before, grab yourself some 18 gauge round. It could be a softer wire or it could be a nice little in the middle medium temper wire like German style. This is what I have right now. I'm working with an antique bronze colourway and I've demonstrated with I think a copper colourway the other day. So all of them are going to work with Lili. It's going to look magnificent with copper because of the gold that you see in the designs, but it's also a really joyful thing to be able to mix up those metal colours. So you do you. Roberta's joined us. Hello you. How are you, darling? So 9 or 10 inches or so is plenty to make one of these lovely drop pendants. And if you want to make a really big one, maybe grab just an extra couple of inches of wire. So the first thing that we're going to do is to run that wire between thumb and forefinger to get it nice and fluid. I've always going to bonk something over on the desk when I'm working. Happens every single time. The reason for that is I've got a very small window of opportunity to show you something and a large area in which I can put things in order to knock them over. So there you go, let's put those pendants back. What we're going to do to start with is just put a singular circular form on the end of the wire. And this is really just a holding point to make sure that our beads don't slide off. So this will be at the bottom end of your pendant. So let's just flip this around and go to the open end and add some beads on. I think for the first one, I'm going to mix it up a little bit and go for a hot pink. And then let's go for, I think, a bicone in that very, very feisty fuchsia. And then maybe we will go for one of these composite beads. It looks like it's got mother of pearl. Now, I've not tried one of these on this wire. Let's have a look. Yep, perfect. So let's start with just 3 beads. Now, that's going to mean that we have plenty of wire. This is around about 9 inches in length, this piece. So 3 beads, 9 inches, plenty of wire. If you wanted to add loads and do this lots and lots and make a really long, extravagant drop, you'll probably want a little bit more wire. So let's just allow those to drop down into position to begin with. And what I want to see is around about an inch gap down here between where I made that little circular form and the first bead. And then I'm going to apply a couple of bits of spacing, just a couple of wraps of wire to fill in between there. So your 18 gauge wire measures 1 millimetre across. So if you imagine that you leave space for 3 passes of wire between each bead, we're just kind of guesstimating, nothing really set in stone, unless you're making earrings, in which case do one and then do another one at the same stage. In that way you won't lose what it is you're trying to achieve. So we've left ourselves some spaces between those beads. Let's leave a space up at the top as well. And I'm going to turn a right angle bend. Now at this stage, it doesn't really matter what orientation that little hook loop bead stopper is in, because we're going to mess with that later. So don't worry overly if that's not in the right position. Now the bend that we've made is so that we can create ourselves a bail. I'm just going to reach over and grab my 6-step bail making pliers. When I make pendants, I quite like to have a reasonably large bail up at the top, just because it means that you can pop that onto any threading material. So if you wanted to wear your pendant on a ribbon, you've got plenty of space. Certain chains have got quite bulky closures at the end, or clasps, so you will want to allow space for that chain to pass through. So I'm just going to go for a wrapped loop, and I think I'll use number 5 on that bail maker. Let's see if I can avoid the camera today. Draw that all the way around. So the beads are still mobile. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to let that worry me one little bit. So that's really quite a large bail I've made up at the top. And what we're going to do now is grip across that bail without squashing where the wire crushes down. I beg your pardon, without pressing down where the wire crosses over. Got my words completely backwards then. Now if I just lift that to the camera slightly so I can bring the tail round, all I want to do is wrap around twice. So you can see we've got a wrapped loop up at the top, and then we've got a couple of wraps of wire just to keep everything nice and safe. Now usually what happens when you create a wrapped loop bail, which is a very simple bail, one side will look nicer from the front than the other. So if I flip that over, I think that this is a slightly prettier aspect, and it's just to do with where the wire has to bend more. So at the front, we've got a nice straight line. If I just tilt it over slightly, this looks nice and straight from the front. But the back wire has to tilt from the widest point up to the central point. So you can just play around with that slightly if you need to try and get that to sit down. Give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze to tighten it up. But you can decide whichever way you think looks nicest. So if you look at that, you can see the tilt in the wire. Flip it over, the wire looks straight. So that would be my advice, but it doesn't really matter. So let's warm through this tail of wire. Give that a good squish and a squeeze to get it nice and toasty. So we're going to put the first bead up to the top. Now, can you see that that heavy wire that's circled around is on top of the core? The core wire is the one that travels through the middle of those beads. So I'm going to make sure that's nice and toasty warm. Bring the wire round to the side, but draw it underneath that core wire. So travels from the top to underneath. And then I'm going to pinch that very firmly, draw the tail of wire over the top once, and then take it off in the opposite direction. Now you can bring all of your wraps, let me just grab a sample. You can have all of your wraps on one side of the bead. So on this piece, for instance, all of the little kisses that travel around the side, kisses and hugs, they're all on the left-hand side of the pendant. Now you can flip that around and you can wrap one side, then the other, or you can just go completely Billy Bonkers and do random. It's absolutely up to you. For this demonstration piece, I'm going to take the wire off on the other side. Now that means that the wrapping wire is currently underneath the core. So when I bring my next bead into position, I want to get some warmth into that wire. And then I'm going to draw it down because we're going for a funny shaped bead now. So you can get help if you're using one of the rectangular oblong beads, or if you're using one of the drop beads because they're drilled like so. You can use your pliers to help you chase that little shape change. So I'm going to estimate just a little bit further along from where the actual line of change on that bicone is, the halfway point. And I'm going to give that a quick wiggle, bringing the wire from underneath the core out to the side over the top. And if I push that down into place, we've made quite a funky little wrap around the outside. Now you might like to just take a couple of seconds to make sure that that angle is perfect, always being mindful of beads that you don't smash or scratch them. So I just slid the bead out of the way for a second, just to get that to sit where I want it to. And now I'm really happy with how that looks around the outside of that lovely bicone. So I'm now going to grip, I'm just going to put my thumbnail down over the top of that bicone to protect it. Bring the tail all the way around 1.5 times so that it goes back over the top now. It's on top. And I'm just going to ensure that that sits down flat. So again, I'm protecting my bead with my thumbnail. Give that a teeny tiny squish just to get it to sit down. If it decides to move, you can ask it nicely to move back again. And then I'm going to get some more warmth into this tail of wire and bring that round one last time. Now the reason I go from the top to underneath, from the underneath to on top, is because it gives you this really nice flowing design. You can of course go always from the top to the top. When it wraps round, dependent on whether you come out to the left or the right, you can decide where you want to take it from there. So we are going to, let's just get that fluff off the board. We're going to take this all the way around one more time. So a little bit of warmth before you do anything, all the way around. And I think I'll take that underneath because it just follows the flow of the metal. So give that a little bit of a clench and we'll take that wire all the way around 1.5 times. But what I might do on this piece is add a tassel on the bottom, I think. So what we're going to do is to draw this tail of wire all the way over the front again. Just give that a tiny tighten up just across those two little wraps. Pull that out to the side. Now what that means is I really don't need all of this great big tail because I'm going to make a super simple loop off the bottom of the design here. So I'm going to pull the wire that where we started from, that very starting point. I'm going to pull that out to one side for a second, and then I'm going to make a teeny tiny loop. So I'm going to use the smaller side of my memory wire finishing pliers, and just rotate that around to make a simple loop. Now, what's the difference between a simple loop and a wrapped loop? If you've never made wire jewellery before, a wrapped loop is where the loop is finished with a little rotation around the core. So this is super safe and super strong. A simple loop is where you have a circular form, but we cut off the residue of the wire just here, look twice and then cut once, and then you don't have to get upset about things. Pop that in my scrap pot, and you can see that that loop is a little bit of a funny shape. So we're going to make that nice and flat. So you will have, if you've ever worked with pre-made earring wires, you will have found a simple loop down at the bottom of the design. What I'm doing now is applying strength to that form by opening and closing the flat faces of my pliers on that loop. And then what we can do is open it as if you're opening a jump ring. So you only pull forwards one side, just one half of that little loop. Let's add that floral tassel in, and then we'll close that little loop back up. So take your time, and when it's back in place, you can give that another little strengthen, and you know that that's nice and safe and strong, which leaves us with now an opportunity to hide that simple loop with a coil. If you've never made a coil before, start slowly, move slowly, and don't give yourself any pressure. So I'm going to again use my memory wire finishing pliers. Just seen that this hasn't been flush cut on this end, so I'm just going to trim away that very last tiny little sliver of metal. And now it's got a nice flat end to it. And what we will do then is use those memory wire finishing pliers just to start creating a circular form. But I don't completely close it up. You can see there's a gap there. And that's because when I grip that circular form, I can then push the wire tail inside the rest of the wire. The slower you go when you're learning to make coils, the neater they will be. And I'm allowing that to just turn through maybe 1/8 of a circle at a time until I can bring that all the way home. When I've finished creating the coil, I have an opportunity to push that downwards over that magical little loop that we just made. So just get that all the way home. If I show you that sideways, that coil is sticking out at a jaunty angle for the moment. Gabriella is in. Hello to you. Hello to everyone. What we're going to do now is just push that down over the surface of the pendant. And you'll see that we've got ourselves a jaunty little pink drop pendant with that magically suspended floral tassel down at the bottom. So I'll put that with his brother just up here. Make sure that they don't fall over, because obviously the second I move my hand they will fall over, but never mind, eh? So why don't we make one of something like this? Do you want to see how to make the wire go out to the side without circling directly on a bead? Sometimes if you're working with an odd shaped bead or a very fragile bead, you might like to not put any pressure on the bead at all. So this one at the top, although these are fabulous beads for wrapping, rondelles are perfect shape to work with on a design like this. Sometimes you might not want to wrap directly around it. So for this piece, we are going to work with a slightly longer length of wire. Let me just measure this one. This is around about 11 inches. 11 inches. It is, again, 18 gauge round medium temper wire. I'm glad that we are having fun with Color Trends Bead Mix in Lili. So again, we're going to start by running the wire several times, well, 3 or 4 times between thumb and forefinger to get that nice and fluid and ready to use. So what we'll do is we'll start again with a little bead stopper, and if you want to, because we know we're going to be putting a spiral on the bottom of this design, check you've got a flush cut. Let's take that very end tip away. We'll start with a nice neat spiral, and then we won't have to undo or trim anything away. So again, all the way around, but not completely closed up. And then switch to your flat facing pliers to push that round form inside the rest of the wire. So I'm not going to go too far because I haven't decided how much wire I want to use on the rest of my pendant. So let's stack some beads into position, shall we? I think I'm feeling the purples now. So let's have down at the bottom of the design one of these beautiful, they're almost like jelly. Have you seen the new Bee Jelly collection? Oh my word. I'm recording a tutorial on Saturday for that. I have the piece over here on my shoulder. I'll show it to you before I leave. Side note, Jem, Green Girl Studios had stretch exercises on their show yesterday. I hope it will help. I have where would I see Green Girl Studios? Drop me a message later, darling, and I'll have a look. Thank you very much for thinking of me. So why don't we add in one of those rondelles in the middle? And then I think, do you know what? I'm feeling purple. Let's go for one of these. And then, oh, I think probably I should stop there. No, beads, more beads. Let's add another one of those little rondelles, and there we go. So I've gone for a very simplistic design. What we're going to do again is leave a good inch of wire down at the base and then add some imaginary spaces before we turn the corner to make that bail. Let's add that on across like so. So we've got an inch of spare wire down at the bottom to make a large spiral, a small spiral, whatever we fancy, but we've got wire to do it. And I've left imaginary space between each bead, about 3mm or 3 passes of this wire. It's more than you need, but that's fine. And I've turned again away at 90 degrees. Debbie says, hello to you, darling. Cherie says, I was on that show yesterday, the Fab Jelly show. They all look amazing. I'll give you a sneaky peek before I love you and leave you this evening. If I forget, say, Jem, show me the jelly. Show me the jelly. Show me the jelly. That was Tom Cruise, wasn't it? So for this one, I'm going to go number 4 on those bail makers, and because I've got a little bit more wire, it might hit the camera or the microphone, so I'm just going to try to avoid that if possible. Just means that my hand moves slightly out of focus for a second. It's also meant that my round form isn't incredibly round. I can usually fix that just with a few little tweaks. There we go. So that's my bail shape up at the top of the design there. So let's rotate that around. Now I'm doing this opposite-handed. Normally you would rotate the wire around, but what I'm going to do is allow that circular form at the top to spin around because it means I'm less likely to hit my camera. Let's tighten that up. If you just do exactly as I showed you on the first design and move the wire around that central core, you will have less dramas. Do you know what? I almost said you'll have less dromedaries. That's a camel, right? I can never remember if a dromedary is 2 humps or 1. Let's give that a little bit of a tighten up. There we go. That looks pretty neat and tidy. Don't make me laugh or I'll show you the jelly. Oh, I say. So what we're looking to have is our bail at 90 degrees to the desk. Now my wire, obviously, it's not going to work up there. So I need to push that over one more time so it goes out to one side. I'm going to tighten that coil up neatly, like so. And what we're going to do is I'll show you now how to create a shape that's larger than your chosen bead, just in case you have a fragile bead. These are not. They're perfectly adequate to work with in terms of strength, and they are incredibly beautiful. Really, really lovely. So I have my bail makers at hand, and that is for a good reason. I'm going to pop those bail makers in if I can get the beads just out of the way for a second. And I think we'll start off with number 5 and make it smaller from there. So just to show you, the wrapping wire is currently on top of the core, so it means that I will need it to pass underneath after I've made this circular form. In fact, I think number 4 will be big enough. So let's put number 4 in there and just rotate that around so that it sits reasonably close, and then you can pop your bead into that gap. So I actually think that looks a really lovely variation of the Little Hugs and Kisses design where it wraps directly around the bead. So I think probably I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller, and you can either use your bail makers again, don't forget to scooch the bead out of the way, or you can very gently just coerce that wire in a little bit. So once I've decided that that's the shape I want to work with, I'm going to put my pliers on the wrapping wire just underneath that core, and draw the wire around. Now the reason I'm doing that with the pliers is because it's easier to retain the shape. It's very easy to pull this tail of the wire and to lose this shape. It will tighten up. So we don't want to have that tightened up. We want to have that just skirting around the edge beautifully. Now I do need to just flip this upside down for a moment and show you that there's a bit of a gap here that's very, very loose. So I want to hold onto the bead safely between thumb and forefinger, scooch these guys out the way and just tighten that up slightly. And once I've got that really neat and tidy around the core, I can bring that wire all the way around again. So you can see we have skirted around the outside and we've got mobility in the bead. We've not put any pressure on it at all. So I think I'm going to bring the wire over one more time. So I do need to hold that quite firmly. Let's see if we can avoid the camera. And then I'm just going to tighten that up slightly. So you can see we've got two visible wraps and I've brought my wire back to the left-hand side of my drop pendant again. So I hope that you're enjoying the Color Trends bead mix in Lili. I know that I adore the colour purple. I hope that you will enjoy it as well. But I do have to just show you one more time these beautiful, I think they're clay floral beads. Absolutely gorgeous. I had to play with some polymer clay the other day. And, well, let's just say I ended up making Deadpool instead of flowers because I'm not generally a flowery girl, but these beads really have my heart. So I'm just going to ensure that that little wrap is nice and tight. Get that set into position before I bring up my next bead. Now you could, of course, go for a broad wrap that skirts around fresh air again if you want to, or you could go for that little hugs and kisses. So I'm going to get that wire warm. Currently, let's take a look. Let's slow it down. The wrapping wire is on top of the core, so push that bead into position, grip the bead, draw the wire underneath the core. Now, one of the pitfalls of this design is that sometimes the wire will start to creep around and you won't notice. So do make sure that you'll be able to see all of that from the front, because sometimes when you're wrapping, it's easy to lose sight. So keep popping it on the desk. Have your hanging loop or your bail up at the top at 90 degrees to the desk, and then you'll be able to see what level of visibility that wire has. Anne says purple is my favourite colour, and Cherie kindly says loving this. I'm loving it too. So let's hold that skirting around the edge wire in position and draw the tail of wire all the way around. And I'm going to go for 2 wraps again, I think. Quite like how this is looking. Now you have the opportunity to hug the bead like we have done with the lovely vibrant purple one, or you can make that big space. And I think I'm going to hug the bead this time, so drawing the tail underneath again, and then I'm going to draw the tail of wire all the way around the core twice. If it wraps on top of itself, ask it nicely not to and it'll sort its life out. So again, just check that everything is nice and true, and you can see that lovely skirting wire from the front surface. Now you might not think that it looks nice having one of those rondelles with a gap and one without, so you do you. I really like to play around with shapes, sizes and textures in jewellery, so make yourself happy. Top of the day, Jem. Speedy healing, bless your heart. Thank you, darling. I love pinks and purples too, says Debbie. Thank you, Stephanie, for your wishes. So we've got one more bead to wrap now, so I'm going to put some extra heat in this. Every time you wrap a piece of wire around another piece of wire, for instance, the strengthening effect goes along the wire a little bit. So although you might think that yes, we've worked hard on this by coiling it, this is already becoming firmer, so you will need to rewarm that briefly. When you're working with a good solid wire like this 18 gauge, you can warm it a couple of times without any major dramas. If you're working with a light wire like a 26 gauge, if you warm it too many times, it becomes fragile. And we don't want that. We want all of your beautiful jewellery to last for ages. So I'm on my last wrap of the show now. Let's give that a smooth through. The wire has come off the top of the core, so I'm going to draw it around the side and underneath. So if I show you that, it's underneath the core wire. Grip that in position and then rotate all the way around. Now you can do really whatever you fancy On this particular design, which is the one I'm showing you now basically, I did 2 coils at the bottom. A smaller one and a larger one. Just means that you can play around with layering coils. That's not quite in the centre, and now it is. So you can wear this one way, you can wear it the other way, and it looks a bit different. So you've got multi-purpose jewellery. If anybody is looking that closely, they'll see the difference. Many people won't even notice that you've got jewellery on at all. So I think I'm going to show you that double coil aspect. So what I'm going to do is to start by moving the tail that we've just been wrapping out of the way for a second. And I'm going to continue coiling the base of that pendant. So let's push that all the way around, all the way around, all the way around. And then I'm going to just flick it out to one side, and you can usually do this by hand. If you struggle with that, then just grip a hold at that base section and centralise that coil so that it swooshes out nicely, and it almost looks like a continuation of the wrapping wire from this angle, which I really like. So another thing that you can do, you can either stack your coils like I did in the demonstration piece. Let's give this a warm through. Let's start creating a coil. This is already flush cut. So let's get that moving around. Start that circular form, but don't make it a complete circle. Grip across that circular form, that incomplete circular form, and push into the tail of the wire that you're working towards, and you'll end up with a more rounded coil. It's very easy to get oval coils or coils that look a little bit like a tadpole, which is all fine, but if you're looking for a rounded coil, then there's an option of how to do it. Debbie says, loving this design, very cool, thank you very much. So what you can do here is be gentle with your wire, and you can play around with how you'd like this to tail off. So I could just coil this all the way up and have that double wrapped coil look. I think it was this one actually. Yes, that's the one with 2 coils on it. Or you can just draw that across and sit it down beneath. Now, if you have small children who like to grab your jewellery, that's probably not a super groovy idea. However, if you're at that stage where the children are no longer grabbing your jewellery, or you just wear it on a day when you don't have small children around you, you can sit one coil beneath the other one, but do apply some strengthening to this. Now, ideally, if you have a block, and if you joined us at, I think it was Summer Camp 23, where we had a hammer and block. It might have been 2022. I can't remember. But you can get, let me just grab one to show you. You can get really teeny tiny blocks for your desk, and you can use this on a standard desk. You don't need a professional jeweller's workbench. So I'm not going to hammer it right now, but I will show you the hammer that I would use, which is my little chasing hammer. Very, very useful. So you could just give that a quick tippy tap, or if you don't have access to a hammer and a block, let's pop that out of the way. You can strengthen these coils by opening and closing your flat facing pliers. Do make sure that you don't squish one pass of wire on top of another pass. Make sure that's just 2-dimensional. Give it a really hearty squish and a squeeze, and you've got yet another look to work with. So these are just some very, very simplistic ways that you can change a single design technique into just an endless supply of drop jewellery. Now, this is one single bead mix. This is Lilli. This is unopened. All of these beads are left over from this box after I've made these 5 pieces of jewellery. I can't quite get my head around how much there is stuffed into one of these boxes. Hello, it is indeed still your gal Jem. Thank you for hanging out with me here today on the beautiful Jessie James Beads channels. What's this? Let me just give you a quick sneaky peek. That's going to be coming to the Jessie James Beads YouTube channel very, very soon. I hope that you've enjoyed Color Trends Bead Mix in Lilli with me today. Don't forget to check out the style guides. The one for this colourway is called Lilli Pulitzer. So have a gander, see what you think. We've been working with Colour Trends today in Lili. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Jem Hawkes, and all of us here at Jessie James Beads. Have yourself a beautiful day. Bye for now.